Are you implementing AI in your organization, but you're not exactly sure what laws apply, or you're not sure how to handle data governance or set up a compliance structure? Maybe you're struggling with putting together an AI policy. I've got something really cool in the works that will cover those topics and more. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're talking about AI governance, where policy meets practice and where policy drives practice. How are you going to set up governance in your organization with something that is amorphous, somewhat unknown, and moving extremely rapidly? Well, start from step one. Understand what the laws are that apply to your organization, that apply to the data, your usage of the data, and any output you're generating. Once you've done that, how do you establish a governance structure internally? Well, you develop policies that address the tools that can be used for your organization, the types of data that can and can't be used, and the use cases for which AI can or cannot be used. You need to set up processes for all of the above, and then figure out who are the people involved. Who's going to approve use cases or tools? Do you need external expertise? Do you have sufficient internal expertise? If you have internal expertise, they probably don't have enough bandwidth to take on an entirely new set of risk management obligations. So factor that into what you're doing and try to piggyback off existing processes. Like if you have an existing review process for allow listing new software applications, add AI tools to that same process. Okay, so tools. How are you going to restrict and govern the tools that can be used in your organization that are AI tools or have to do with AI? Do you go to a big name like OpenAI or Anthropic or Microsoft? Or do you realize those companies are probably moving so fast and implementing changes so quickly and have so many disclaimers that they might be a bigger risk? It's your individual organization. You are the only one who can make that decision. So in your policies, for governance purposes, you want to understand what a tool is, what it could possibly be doing, and ask people to fill out a form. Have your users come to you with, I want to use this tool for the following purposes. And then you and your internal staff can make a decision about, do we need this additional tool? What risk does it introduce? Is it giving us sufficient protection? So you'll look at contracts that we covered in another episode to see what the vendors can and can't do with your data, what rights they give themselves, and limitations they impose on themselves. Once you decide if a tool is usable, then it can go on an allow list, and then people in the organization are allowed to use it. But then cover data types. What types of data can be used in AI tools and cannot? Right from the start, sensitive HR data or protected health information, PHI, or MNPI, any regulated information that you hold that's subject to disclosure laws or breach reporting, you want to consider whether the tool offers you the capabilities to properly handle that data. For example, turns out in Gemini, you don't have the ability to selectively delete something. You can and should set an expiration period. So let's say you pick 24 hours. Then any documents somebody uploads to Gemini in your organization would be wiped after 24 hours. That's a little tricky and prohibitive with having long-term projects, but it at least is an option and something to consider. On the flip side in Gemini, if you want to delete one document within the retention period, so within this 24-hour period, if that's what you've set, then the only option is for an administrator to blow up everything that that particular user has ever uploaded. Those are not ideal, but it's important to do enough testing of a tool and playing around with the tool to discover those types of idiosyncrasies before just a blanket allow and before relying just on information that a provider puts out about its tool. In many organizations, and certainly with license agreements, especially for the larger tools, the agreements say do not add any data, do not use any data with this tool that is subject to privacy regulations or any other kind of regulation. That's understandable, but that is not how organizations are operating using AI tools, especially with the fact that a lot of your users are downloading free AI tools and using them already. So instead of turning a blind eye toward the fact that certain data types might be entered into an AI tool that shouldn't be, set up a reasonable policy where you define things for users and make it easy for them to limit access or to remember to delete things, or don't allow access to certain storage areas or data stores that you have so that you can avoid this problem of putting in data that's not supposed to be put in. You also need to train your users. That should be part of your governance strategy too. Users need to understand the approval process for tools, the approval process for using certain types of data, and then the third chunk, what are the use cases? Using personally identifiable information to create a spreadsheet so that you have an organized list of everyone who has a 401k, that's a different situation than dumping in all the personal information you have about your employees to try to create profiles or understand them as a group and then distribute that information. So force your users to think through on a stepwise basis, what are they actually trying to do with the type of data they want to use? What's the output going to be? Who will be allowed to see it? And what will they be allowed to use it for? Then to round out your governance and risk management, put processes in place that facilitate these applications or these requests and an approval process. And then who are the people who should be doing that? We talked about briefly in the beginning, do you have the internal expertise to evaluate the security of a tool? Well, you also need people who can just review requests for certain use cases. Depending on the size of your organization, you may handle it differently. For example, if you're a small organization, you may just update your existing policies to require different approvals or to affirmatively allow certain tools, data, and use cases. The accountability part of this may just fall to legal and/or IT, and it could just be integrated into your existing cyber and privacy governance framework, so that you can avoid reinventing the wheel. Maybe we talked about piggybacking earlier on some existing processes. Maybe you can piggyback on an account audit cycle or a permission granting cycle or onboarding and offboarding procedures. Don't reinvent the wheel and create separate things for AI if you don't need to. If you're a large company, you may have separate AI compliance and governance structures by virtue of your size. On the board of directors, do you have somebody who has enough AI expertise that they can properly guide your directors in honoring their fiduciary duty and making responsible decisions about moving the company forward? And here I'm really talking about Fortune 500 organizations and AI-forward organizations where AI is embedded in all of the products and services you offer. Your board of directors will need some expertise in that area, but not necessarily a new seat. Maybe you would assign it to a committee of the board or a specific person on the board, but do make sure someone or some committee or some timeline is responsible for considering AI at the board level. Then maybe internally you have a lowercase b board, which will be a review group who can make final decisions on tough calls, whether or not to allow certain data types in AI tools at your organization. The people on that lowercase b board need to get educated. This is part of your governance strategy, making sure people in your organization making decisions about AI are educated about hallucinations and scalability and as ethical and algorithmic or societal risks pop up. And remembering that this technology is not very predictable, so it will need to be followed and frequently reassessed. Last piece of governance is you're going to need to do some privacy assessments to drive the policy with a lowercase p that you infuse into the organization and follow some national standards roadmaps for making sure that your AI governance is as strong as it can be and it's very appropriate for your needs. So DHS has an AI roadmap. There are plenty of others out there. I suggest looking into one of those as you work through developing your AI governance. Thanks for listening to another episode of Decoding Cyber Law. If you've got questions, check out the show notes, our website, or feel free to message me on LinkedIn.